Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, tonight what we're going to try and do just a little bit in honor of the Yahrzeit of the Tzaddik, Amud Ha'olam, Rav Shner Zalman of Liadi, the Baal HaTanya, Admar HaZakin. And in honor of the Yahrzeit, and as the Nasiei Chabad would say, that the Yahrzeit is a simcha gedola for the Hasidim. Not only for the Hasidim, for their mishpachos and their families and every person in their lives. That a tzaddik like the Baal HaTanya, when his neshama ascends, what it does each and every year is it brings down more hashpa'os of that tzaddik. That the histalkus of the tzaddik is what is goyrem, it's what causes a furthering and a deepening of the expression of the light of that tzaddik. Especially when it comes to a tzaddik like Rav Shner Zalman of Liadi. There's so much to say, and it's impossible to even open one's mouth, but one must when trying to talk about the tzaddik, the Baal HaTanya. And one Indian that comes to mind is what the tzaddikim would say is that the name Shner Zalman, can be broken up into the acronym Shnei Or, into the words, into the compound word Shnei Or, two lights. That the essence, or the ungraspable essence of the Baal HaTanya was a doubling of light, a bidirectionality of sorts, a recognition that at the heart of Torah Chasidus there lies a dual pulsation that is singular in its core, a movement from above below and a movement from below above, Kesser and Gvura at one. Chachma and Bina at once. That was the chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. That was what the Magid taught, and that's what the Baal HaTanya was able to bring down and be Moiser Nefesh to bring into Osios. The fact that these two oros are in truth part and parcel of one or. And what are these two oros that the Baal HaTanya Schlusi Oganalenu was associated with? It's what's referred to in Kabbalah and then explained in Chassidus as an Or Yashar and an Or Hoizer, a direct light and a reverberating light. An Or Yashar, a direct light, as we've spoken about in the past, is a light that emerges from above down below. It's an expression of vitality, of something from above in its supernal state down below in a lower state. That moves forward quickly without prevention. There's no blockages there. It's simply a full and direct expression from the infinite above, so to speak, down to the finite below. And then you have Or Hoizer, which is a reverberating light, as expressed in the depths of the writings of not only the Arizal, but the Ramak. And already in the Sefer HaBahir, this concept is made very clear. And then the Ramak brings from there, and the Arizal, and the Baal HaSulam, and all the tzaddikim who came to the world to explain the secret of Or Hoizer. It's what happens when the light that comes down from above to below hits the very bottom and emerges back upwards with more intensity than it had prior to its hitting the bottom. Or Hoizer is what happens when that reality from above hits the reality below, and in the friction that is caused in the oppositional intensity of spirituality and this worldliness, it causes some sort of reaction where the light, like it's hitting a mirror, it doubles back down and it moves upwards with more intensity and more ferocity. Or Yashar is a direct expression where things are clear. Or Hoizer is already where things have lost their clarity, and now things are caught up in the muddled kind of admixture of what something looks like at its end result, b'soif maisa. But at that place, the Or Hoizer, something happens, and there's a doubled intensity where the light that came from a below down to above, which appears to be a degradation, is now revealed to be ascending even higher, revealing that the degradation itself was really the source of ascension. And that Torah, that dual light of the Baal HaTanya, Shnei Or, the two lights, recognition of the unity between Or Yashar and Or Hoizer, is one of the things that are at the heart of the Baal HaTanya's Torah. The balance between the tzaddik and the beinoni. The tzaddik is a bechina of Or Yashar, it's a bechina of chachma that comes directly down from above to below, and the beinoni is a lashon of bina, which is the Or Hoizer, which comes from below back above. These two elements at the heart of everything, as is musbar very clearly in Chinuch Katan, the need to hold on to both ideas at once. The Tzemach Tzedek pointed out, Schlusi Oganalenu pointed out that Or, the gematria 207, when it's doubled, Shnei Or is the gematria 414, which is the gematria of schok. It's the gematria of laughter. because there's really nothing funnier than the avoid of the Baal HaTanya, who's coming to teach us that what we expected to be the highest point of spirituality, which is an Or Yashar, descends from above down below, is in fact only equal and as intense as the spirituality and the experience that comes from the encounter down below up above. That both oros are one and the same, and both reflect one another and allow each other to grow. And that's the source of Schleik. That's the source of the Or of the Ein Sof that comes down and is Megala to us very quickly. It's Megala to us very quickly that down here and above are both the places of the Avodah. And it's specifically very often down here that we find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a more intense way. Zok the Baal HaTanya and the Rebbe, the Tzaddik, Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita, points out, based on an understanding of the Mittler Rebbe, as well as Rav Aaron Halevi of Straselia. Rav Aaron Halevi was the Talmud Mufak of the Baal HaTanya. The Mittler Rebbe was the son and the Talmud Mufak of the Baal HaTanya, and both of them, through their differentiated paths that are ultimately two parts of the very same whole, reveal the full Or of what the Baal HaTanya was trying to bring into the world. But Rav Aaron Halevi of Straselia hints to it, and Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita reveals it, that in truth, Sefer HaTanya is a Sefer of Chachma. It's a Sefer that deals primarily with trying to stay above, with trying to stay in a space of Or Yashar, trying to be a tzaddik, remembering the shvua that we took to be a tzaddik. Sefer HaTanya wants to elevate us out of the behema. It's a sefer of tshuva. It's bringing us out of that place of stuckness in this world. And the Sefer of Tanya hints and explicitly states that the job of an oived is to live in a world of that's close as possible to Atzilus, to be mevarer, the klipas noiga, to be mevarer, everything that keeps a person stuck with the attachments to the nefesh habahamis, those that are removable and those that are irremovable, all elements. Sefer Tanya is a sefer of moving upwards. As the tzaddikim point out, Tanya, which is the letter Tuf, Nun, Yud, Aleph, each of those letters point to a future orientation in terms of textuality. If I'm talking about the verb of walking, so I would say telech, one will walk, nelech, one will walk, yelech, one will walk, and elech, one will walk. The Tuf, the Nun, the Yud, and the Aleph point to a movement upwards, a progression, perpetual progression of trying to ascend back into a place of a tzaddik, not forgetting. But what's not present so much in the Tanya is the avoida of Or Hoizer, is the avoida of finding oneself in the not in the stuck place, but in what it means to be a human being and all of its manifestations in each and every person's understanding, with hopefully the greatest amount of joy and simplicity and calmness possible. The Torah of the Or Hoizer, the Torah of the Baal Tshuva, what it means to mamish be a Beinani, what it means to mamish accept being a Beinani to a certain degree. That's not so present in the Sefer HaTanya. That's not so present in the Sefer HaTanya, or not as present as the avodah of trying to be a tzaddik. And there's one place, the Rebbe, Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern, points out that the Baal HaTanya hints to this secret of Kesser, not only Chachma, but Kesser, a level higher than the Sefer HaTanya, a level on a certain place where a person comes to realize the secret of Ani v'ayin b'vasachas. Sefer HaTanya teaches a person how to be an ayin, how to live with bittul, and based on the Arizal, which says that the Or Ein Sof is not mislabish, as he writes in the Haggah, is not mislabish in anything except by way of the Chachma, the Adam Kadmoin, and that's the secret, as the Maggid said, of bittul, that bittul is the shirish of all things. Bittul is the avodah of chachma, the avodah of the tzaddik, the avodah of being able to get over myself and move beyond myself and move beyond the vicissitudes of this worldliness. But the avodah of Kesser is to be both above and below at the same time, to be a tzaddik in the world of Atzilus, but also to own the avodah of being a Baal Tshuva, as the Mittler Rebbe writes in his famous kuntris of Mashiach Asfal Asit La'asfe at Tzaddikai B'tiyufta. The Mashiach will come to restore the truly righteous in tshuva, meaning to say that on a level of Kesser, there's a recognition that it's not only the ayin of Chachma and the ayin of Atzilus, but rather it's the ani of Bria Yitzira and Asiya, it's the ani of being in that place of Bina, in that place of Beinani. And in the level of Kesser, ani and ayin are not contradictory to one another, but rather they coexist in an impossible paradox of Echad Shushtaim, one that is two and two that is one, that reveals a unity greater than the sum total of its parts. Rav Aaron Halevi and the Rebbe, Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita, identify Parak Lamed Vav in Tanya as a hint, almost like a breaking through the creases of the light of Kesser in the Sefer of Tanya, which is a Sefer of Chachma. Because in the Perek Lamed Vav of Tanya, what the Alter Rebbe reveals to us is how, in truth, ultimately, in spite of the fact that everything is about being a Yid who lives in Atzilus with absolute bittul of Chachma and clarity of the mind all day, and the desire to be Masik Atzmus, v'chule, 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 in truth, there's a certain light that ascends specifically out of this worldliness, out of this lowly place, out of this world and all of its vicissitudes, in the Dira B'Tachtainim Mamish, that the Baal HaTanya reveals that the entire Tachlis is to Megala, the Or of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not above in the world of Atzilus, but specifically down here in the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, and the Tachtis Asiya, what the Baal HaTanya refers to as a Tachtain She'ein Tachtain Yoter Mimenu, that there's no lower place imaginable wherein the presence of God can still be operant in a revealed and concealed way. And it's specifically there in the Dira B'Tachtainim, in the Chashach HaKaful Mechupal, in the darkness that has doubled over itself, that a Yid has the ability to be Mamshech, Kudshabrichu, down here into this place, to be Megalak Kvod Shemaim in such a way that we mahapich the Ani, the self, and all of its egoisms and vicissitudes and struggles, and we allow that to become the source and the mechanism and the vehicle of revealing an even deeper light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shorish of Schoik. And in Perek Lamed Vav and Tanya, in the Dira B'Tachtainim, what we see over there are the hints of the secret of Kesser, the secret that it's not only in ayin of Chachma in the world of Atzilus that a person has to find themselves, which is the Or Yashar, which is the first Or, which is not such a funny light, but it's specifically within the Or Hoizer, within that place of the reverberating light that hits its limit and bounced back up from that place of emptiness, of Ephes. It's specifically there that the Or Hoizer is going to be Miskala. And it's specifically there where the schoik is going to come from. Now, I heard a teaching from a very close friend of mine, a very, very close friend of mine, and I wasn't able to find it inside in Torah Or, but it was in Chasidus Mevueres, which are incredible, remarkable svarim that are Pesach, L'chol, for somebody who wants to enter into the light of the Baal HaTanya, into Chasidus Chabad. But the Torah that he showed me was as follows. He says that when the Alter Rebbe says that he wants to find himself in the Dir B'Tachtainim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be found in the lowest place, where is that lowest place? That lowest place imaginable, where the Or Hoizer is going to reveal itself. That lowest place imaginable is where? It's within the place where the concealment of God is possible, where it's possible to conceive of a world without the animating and infinite light that both permeates and surrounds all of existence at every moment, to the extent that everything is as if it did not exist. Kulo kaima kiloi chashivai, like the Tzemach Tzedek says, the chaf hadimyon. In spite of the fact that there's a darga that there's nothing mamish, really the darga we have right now is kiloi chashive, kula kaima kiloi chashive. It's as if nothing exists, because everything still continues to exist, Baruch Hashem, and the yesh is megala the ayin in an even deeper way. But in this place, in that place where a person can conceive of losing sight of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of living in a world devoid of the light of Hashem, that's the Dir B'Tachtainim. That's where Hashem wants to be found. That's the deepest place. What means to say is that when a person thinks and contemplates HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu again for just a moment, and believes in their koyach of Or Hoizer, their ability to return back from the bottom upwards above even the point of origin to a loftier place than ever imagined, when a person is mechazik themselves, and a person finds emuna and chachma and bittul, and the azas de kedusha and the ahava mesuteres in that moment, that's the gilui eloikus, so to speak, in the Dir B'Tachtainim. When I conceive of God in my mind, when I realize that the tzimtzum is loy kipshuto, like the Baal HaTanya heard in Mezrich, like the Baal HaTanya heard from the Maggid of Mezrich, it said, Lo yisachalu Hashem Kodshi, do not defile my holy name. Lo yita'aseh chalal b'shem Kodshi, do not ever come to, God forbid, assume that there's an actual halal. It's an impossibility. It's a joke of all jokes. The halal is not real, because the halal is also a revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when a Yid thinks about that and contemplates that in this moment, so in that point, they're drawing HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the Dir B'Tachtainim. Something that the Alter Rebbe gave over either the week of his death, very close to his death, or mamish moments before his death, depending on the girsa in the Masorah of Chabad. The seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, Schlusia Ganalenu, brings up this shmua, this small petek almost, this small Torah that the Baal HaTanya gave over, known as Nefesh HaShvela, the lowly spirit. either right before his death, at the moment of his death, or a week before his death, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that whatever the Masorah was, we don't know, but we know that this is worthy of study. We know that this mimer is worthy of study. He says it's amazing. He says it's amazing to me that there has not been a commentary on this yet. The Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote that in one of the sichos. And then I saw something incredible today, that when the Lubavitcher Rebbe was younger, he went to his father-in-law, he went to the Sher, he went to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he asked him about this. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe referred to this mimer of Nefesh HaShvela as a mud nazach, a very strange davar muzar ad ma'oid. And he brought it to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that the Frierdiker Rebbe had a big smile on his face and didn't say a word. So that was the response to Nefesh HaShvela. Kilu, it's mamish, the place where the schok comes out from. And this is what the Baal HaTanya is teaching us on his deathbed. And this was another thing that we know the Baal HaTanya did on his deathbed, and it's also a diyun in the writings of the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, is whether or not the Baal HaTanya drank a cup of coffee before Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos of his Histalkus. And Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita as an arichus through the Pilpul and the Poiskim, how it's absolutely and fundamentally in a shas of choili, sheyesh b'sakan, or whatever it was, for somebody to drink coffee before Havdalah. That's first and foremost, as we've discussed in the past. But the question that Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern wanted to ask, and wants to ask, and the question, the Lubavitcher Rebbe brought this up as well. He says, we know, he says, whether or not the Baal HaTanya drank a cup of coffee on his deathbed, he says, I don't know. It would seem strange because part of the Masorah is that the Baal HaTanya died suddenly on his deathbed, so why would he have allowed himself to drink a cup of coffee? But the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that suffice it to say that it's significant enough to have a discussion about, because by the Rebbe Rashab, he also drank a cup of coffee before he died. But by the Rebbe Rashab, we know he was sick for a while already, so it makes sense. But with the Baal HaTanya, it's not clear. So, but either way, the cup of coffee that the Baal HaTanya asks for on his deathbed is something deeply significant, and we're going to see very quickly and externally how this mimer of Nefesh Shvela, of what it means to have a lowly spirit, what it means to be a yid in this world, what it means to have the or of schok, what it means to recognize that it's not only the or Yashar that I'm trying to grab hold of, but rather it's specifically the or Hoizer, it's the shnei or, it's the two lights, the above to below and the below to above. We're going to see how that comes out in Nefesh Shvela, and as kind of like the last teaching of the Alter Rebbe, and we're going to see how that connects to the coffee as well. So this Nefesh HaShvela is printed in numerous places. The place I'm reading from right now is from the Igros Kodesh of Admar HaZaken, Igeres Kuf Ches. So this is brought down from the Shnas Tov Kuf Ayin Nun, Zois Kasav Chvoid Kedushas Admar HaZaken Karab Lizman Histafluso. This is what was written prior to the death. This is how the Baal HaTanya, as I choose to understand it, is giving us direction as to, at the end of all things, how to survive, how to continue, what one does when they find themselves, when those two oires appear to be going out, when a person can no longer laugh at Mitzias, when the tzaddik is nostalgic from this world. So this is a hadracha, this is a petek almost of how to function, and it's the source of the Frierdiker Rebbe's smile. Nefesh hashvela be'emes la'amisai. What does it mean to have a destitute spirit? Emes la'amisoi. Emes la'amisoi, which is a lashon that has a rooting in Chazal, but it's mamish lashon from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and we know the hiskashros of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov and the Baal HaTanya, the Sari Meya and the Sari Alafim, Schusim Yagan Aleinu. But Nefesh HaShvela ve'emes la'amiso. What's the truth of the matter? What does it mean at the end of the day? I'm not looking for the truth. I'm looking for the truth of the truth. I want to know what rests hidden within the depths of truth. What does it mean to have a Nefesh HaShvela? What does it mean to not take myself too seriously? What does it mean to have a level of self-acceptance where I allow myself to move smoothly and calmly within this world in accordance with my own efforts, to do what I can, and to have humility, to not be a haughty individual, to not need to be the center of attention, to not be stuck in one's own ruminations of self-significance or importance or lack of importance, God forbid, but to have a healthy azas de kedusha, belief in oneself that is coupled with the recognition that in the end of the day, the things that I believe in are not my own, they're gifts from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's an avodah matana, it's an oilemecha tir b'chayecha, a gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, like the Baal HaTanya says in the 14th parak of Tanya. But the Nefesh HaShvela, what does it mean to be a Nefesh HaShvela? Be'emes la'amiso. B'shayrashay avoidasay hu Torah gashmis. in its truth, at the end of the Baal HaTanya's life, after this battle with Napoleon, after the battle and going to prison and Mamish going down into the pits of hell for Klal Yisrael to be Megala the Or of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and the Hezberim that he gives to Rabbeinu Ha'arizal, which is a beer on the Rashbi, which is a beer on Moshe Rabbeinu. What this tzaddik did for Klal Yisrael wouldn't exist. It's a davar pashut nowadays that we wouldn't exist without Lubavitch, but it's a davar pashut that we have to understand that without the Baal HaTanya, Klal Yisrael would have had no hamshacha in terms of kedusha samachshava, of hasagos b'darchei hayichud. So what is the shirish of the Torah at the end of the day? B'shirashay avodasu Torah gashmis. It's a this worldly Torah. It's a Torah of this world, not up there, not in Himmel, not in Atzilus, but it's a Torah of Gashmias. It's a Torah of being stuck in this place. Bein la ubein la'acherim. Whether it's with me in regards to myself, it's a Torah of Gashmias, it's a Torah of this world, it's a Torah of Adir b'tachtonim, as well as with other people. It's a Torah of Adir b'tachtonim, a Torah of Gashmias. Bein begmilas chasadim gashmiim, whether it means performing actual acts of kindness with my body, with a maisa, with a real action, the eitzas mirachuk, whether it's through trying to orient one's thinking towards a healthier place or offering some form of advice to another person, with regards to anything that pertains to the normal, regular people of Klal Yisrael. The avoida of the tzaddik, the avoida of the Torah is a Torah gashmias that has to be niskariv to the das of the balei batim hapshutim. Af ki rubam ki kulam him divrei sheker. In spite of the fact that most of the issues that these people are bringing to me, in spite of the fact that most of the issues that these people experience in the world, the Beinanim experience in the world, in spite of the fact that most of it is lies, most of it is not true, and most of it is not authentic, and most of it is not rooted in any ontological way in reality, in this world it's impossible. A person needs to go by way of Sheker in this world. A person needs to learn the Torah of Sheker. A person needs to learn what it means to find the Torah in the Olam HaGashmi, in the Or Hoizer. Most of the dealings with other people and the halachic guidance that the tzaddik is giving, or the dealings and the interpersonal relationships and all of the demyonos, the tzaddik is recognizing that most of them in this world are in Yanei Sheker. Why would the tzaddik want to come down here? Why would a tzaddik want to leave the Olamayis ha'elyonim of Sha'ashuam Atzmi and B'pnim Yusam, where the misanig on the Tainuk HaPashat HaBilti Murgash of Elikus, B'chvoido v'atzmo kavyachol, and always kavyachol. Atzmus is always kavyachol. But why would a tzaddik want to come down into a world of a Torah of Gashmias, where most of the time a person has to be stuck in lies? Not only that, but that's the way it has to be. It's impossible to do it any other way. In this world, you're not going to find the chesed shel emes. You're not going to find the ability to really uncover a nekuda of truth, of absolute truth, where it is a chesed shel emes that this person has worked, or that person has attempted, or that person has worked through their thing, or I have worked through my thing, whatever things we need to work through. The Torah of emes is when a person has fully worked through all of them. But the Baal HaTanya is saying is you're not going to find that in this world. It has to be a chesed of sheker. It has to be offering pshara and shalom and calmness and peace and joy by way of sheker. Ki ein emes ela Torah. Because in truth, there's no truth other than the Torah. The emes amar al yivra. And Chazal tell us that before the creation of the world, Hashem came to emes and said, should I create these people? And they said, no, absolutely not. They're full of lies. They can't grasp the emes for anything. They can't grasp the truth of what anything means in this world. And Shalom said, create them. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. So what does Hashem do? Hashem takes emes and he throws it to the ground and it shatters into a million pieces, as the verse tells us that eretz me eretz titzmach, that truth will grow from the ground. Meaning to say that emes said, do not create the world because I can't be found there. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu took emes and he threw him into the world, into a world of sheker, to be megala. The only place that the real emes, that a tzaddik could be megala, is specifically from a place of sheker. Is specifically from a world of concealment, where a person can't have that clarity, where a person is stuck in the Or Hoizer. It's not a b'diavad, it's specifically there. This is how Hashem created the Welt. It has to be a chesed by way of sheker. Ki ein emes ala Torah. The emes amar al yivra. And emes said, do not create them. Shekulam malei shkarim. They're all full of lies. The chesed amar yivra. Shekulam malei chasadim. And chesed said, have compassion, have compassion. They're filled with compassion. See their trying, see their attempts, not their emes, see their sheker, see their pretending and their ki'ilus and the as ifs and the acting of a person's life. B'tishlach emes artza v'oilim b'chesed she'ena shel emes yibaneh. And Hashem threw emes aside and he created a world of chesed she'ena shel emes. That the tzaddik and the tzaddikim and the Torah of the tzaddikim and the Baal Shem Tov and all of the tzaddikim amitim, they were megala to us how we can live in a world of alma de shikra, specifically finding emes within the sheker, specifically in the dir b'tachtonim, specifically suspending our disbelief in ourselves because we can't live up to this deep sense of authenticity that appears to be necessary. And like the Baal Tanya describes in nearly every parak in Tanya, pretend to remember the shvua, pretend to be a tzaddik in this world, pretend to be a tzaddik. Why? Because you can. You could be koifif yourself, and when you're koifif yourself to act, you uncover that ava mesuteris that's been burning all along. The whole Tanya is a book of how to move forward in one's life, how to act as if, and to move forward from darga to darga. That's the Torah of the tzaddikim. It's a chesed she'ena shel emes. It's a chesed she'ena shel emes. But it's the emes la'amiso. It's the ability to find the or in this place. And in the earlier generations, when the real avodah that they were engaged in was the Torah, it was the Torah itself. It wasn't gashmias. It wasn't stuckness in mundane, physical, monetary, financial, psychologically, rooted physical experiences. That wasn't where it was at. Ikar avodas Hashem haya Torah. And at that point, because they were zeicha to an emes on a certain level, so most of the chesed at that point was done by way of emes, meaning that people had to live up to something. You had to be deserving. A person couldn't reveal the joke. The joke is the lie. Back then, there was a certain sobriety of truth where, you had to be deserving of the chesed. Dahainu begadol amaised the koifenu mamshichin. Like the Baal Tanya is pointing out that in the times of the Amoraim and the Tanoim, that there was a certain compulsory element of Avodas Hashem that a person had to engage, a person had to live up to the ideal of Chesed, because it was a Chesed Shel Emes, because it was still closer to a place where Emes was a possibility. Because there was an intensity of truth in the world, there was an availability of truth in the world. That's not the case when it comes to the generation prior to Mashiach. It's no longer a Torah of truth. That the Shechina Kadosha, the Or, has been yored down to such a place to the Afar Mamish Shakal Afar Nafshenu. But as we already know from the Baal Tanya, even though Afar is the lowest place in Parak Lamed Vav, we come to understand that it's the Mana de Kula. That's specifically the place that the light is going to come from. In the Afar, in the Dir B'Tachtonim. We have to find ourselves in a place of Sukkos David HaNefeles in order to uncover the permission to live in that Torah of Sheker, of being Megala, the Torah's emes from within the Sheker of this world, of pretending and believing in our neshama enough to value our pretending, to value our efforts. As the Baal Tanya points out in a radical chiddush, the Rebbe of Ikshemayer Shlita has a maimar on it from Yad Kislev a number of years ago about Igros Chaf in Igros Kodesh, which we discussed. We have a shir on, which is the fact that the Baal Tanya is machadesh, it seems, away from the Mekubalim, or reveals away from the Mekubalim, that when the Kav is yored into the Halal, when the Or of infinite light comes back down into the vacant space, the apparent vacant space after the original Tzimtzum, it descends down to the bottom and it somehow reverberates back up, revealing an even deeper level of Or, and how that's the Iker Chiddush of Torah Chasidus, and that's the Iker Chiddush of the Baal Tanya. And the Rebbe pointed out that this was why the Baal Tanya desired spicy foods when he came out of prison in Russia, even though he didn't taste anything anymore. He had reached a darga of rectification. Elamah, he wanted to feel this worldliness. He wanted the Or Hoizer. He wanted the afar. He wanted that place of where the real stoy comes from. That Torah of Sheker. And at this point, the only avoida is the ankles that feel nothing but still carry out the shlichus day in, day out. Tolerate, abstract experience and tolerate it, because a person is allowing themselves to be the dancing feet, to be the akvayim, beli Torah's emes mishnayis u'braisa Hashem gadfin. We no longer have the Torah's emes, which are the gadfin and yarchin. We don't have the Tanoim and the Amoraim, which are the chagas and the nahi, or the arms. It's the handless beggar and it's the legless beggar of Rabbi Nachman's 13th tale, which be'emes is the truest story of what Torah Chasidus is trying to be megala, how to bring Mashiach specifically without hands and without legs. without MS anymore. How to bring Mashiach from a place of Sheker, to be Megala within the Nefila, the Barnafle, the person who comes out of that Nefila, the Mashiach Tzidkenu, the Or of the Emes La'amiso. And at this point, we no longer have that. Roiv HaChesed Kekulo Hu Shalo Al Pi Torah Emes. Nowadays, the chesed that needs to be found in this world with ourselves, as Rabbi Nachman points out in the 282nd teaching, chesed with ourselves, judging ourselves favorably, judging the other favorably, it has to be by way of a Torah of Sheker, not a Torah of Emes. Shelo al pi Torah of Emes b'gadol ha'maisa. It's no longer with relationship to what is actually happening, but it's the Or Hoizer at this point. Ki im behis karvus ladasa oisa, but rather bringing things down into the language of the individual who is engaged in this world. And empathizing and bending down into his good nature, into my good nature, into their good nature, in spite of the fact that it's not MS. In spite of the fact, specifically because it's not MS. And here the Baal HaTanya reveals himself. This is not a b'diavad. The reason for this is Seif Ma'asav Machshava Techila, Dir B'Tachtoinim. The tachlis of the entire Bria is to be Megala, the kavod of Emes, out of the Sheker itself. To be Megala that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so true, and Hashem Elokeichem Emes is so true that it can even manifest itself in untruth, in Sheker, in the opposite of truth, in the opposite of authenticity. It's everywhere. It's the Seif Masav Machshavat Chila, the end of the matter, the Akvayim, that low place where Emes is no longer accessible. That's specifically where the original desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed. The end is embedded in the beginning. And in truth, and here the Alter Rebbe is prescribing. He's saying that, and let's say in a situation one person is incapable of being empathized with because they can't find that spark of goodness. You can't find that nekuda of even sheker within them, and they're cast off to the side in this business dealing. At that point, if that person is feeling low, azay lenachmoy ulakabel ba'ava, nechama, compassion, comfort, compassion, and love. Comfort, compassion, and love. Or if you have the capacity to reorient yourself or that person to engage with finding those nekudos of emes from within their sheker, and to take that difficult moment of that or hoizer, of that lower place, to be megalev yarviachlo, that in truth it's a loftier place. Zot the Lubavitcher Rebbe Sklusi Ogan Aleinu, that we know that especially on the Yahrzeit, that when a person speaks about an inyan that was niskala, it's niskala more and more. And what we think about and what the tzaddik tells us to do is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, if the Baal HaTanya is giving us eitzah here, nechama, comfort. That's the Torah of the Baal HaTanya. It's the comfort after the prison. It's going down into Gehenna, like the Baal HaTanya said, that the neshamos of Hasidim are neshamos that are stuck in hell. And because in hell there's a prohibition on any grasp of godliness, in that prison there's no access to anything. There's a situm. It's Yosef HaTzadik who's yored into the bore. It's Moshe Rabbeinu who's buried outside of Eretz Yisrael. It's a tzaddik who has to go to the end of the earth in order to do mevar things. It's specifically from there that a person comes to a place of tchias hamesim, and there's a harchava, there's an expansivity, a shnei or, an or hoizer that comes out afterwards, a schoik, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is megala nechama to us as well, when we're ma'ira the nechama for ourselves and for other people. In the end of the day, Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern points out that the reason the Baal HaTanya wanted to drink coffee was because kafe and kave are representative of the same thing, that just as caffeine gives hope to the individual's body to persevere beyond the limits of what they feel they're capable of, so does hope propel a person psychologically and spiritually to a place beyond themselves. And in the end of the day, when all is said and done, when all the missions are over and the failures are the failures and the successes are the successes, and the hispashtus haTorah and the hafatzas mayan and the Yichud HaYichudim has begun already to take place, and the Baal HaTanya saw what he had to see, and he said, I have Gehenna in my stomach. And yes, the Baal HaTanya was sick, but in line with that story that we know about the neshamas of Gehenna, that could be what the Baal HaTanya meant. I have Gehenna in my stomach. All of those neshamas that are stuck in Gehenna, I'm going to take them out with me. I'm going to feed them. I'm going to be able to reveal to them the Or Helukus that they've been desiring for so long. And in the end, all the Baal HaTanya could do was have a kivoy of kave kivisi al HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Rashbi on his deathbed, like Moshe Rabbeinu at his death, like the Arizal at his death, a kivoy for Hamshacha and his pashtos, and a belief, the ultimate belief that everything that the tzaddikim said, especially the Baal HaTanya, especially the Admorim of Chabad, and that avoida has to be understood properly and learned deeply. It is in a complex and fundamentally complex, delicate system of Torah that has the capacity of transforming a person's life from an emptiness into a fullness, and Be'ezras Hashem being Megala Kvoid Shamayim in the Dir B'Tachtonim Mamish, Be'ezras Hashem.